Was
My
one,
sister goes
come on.
with us, which is nice,
Yes.
because it's hard for me with the two kids being so far apart.
Yes.
Like, he wants fun rides, I can't take her.
Yes,
And
yes,
so
yes.
it's one place I can't do by myself.
Right, right.
So my sister comes with
Incredible
kids.
how much the actor
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So at night,
shaped that.
Okay,
you
Madam
watch your
Clerk.
show
Yeah.
and you and your sister.
Are we live?
Yes.
Great.
Recording in progress.
Welcome all. We are now in public session. I'd like to ask for all of us to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Conti, if I may, could you kindly provide the guidance for the hearing of citizens?
Members of the public are now welcome to come up to the microphone to address the Township Committee. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to be heard about issues which are not topics scheduled for public hearings tonight. Those present may step up to the microphone to be heard. If you're watching via Zoom, you may speak during any of the public comment sessions by following the Zoom instructions to raise your hand. Whether in person or online, when you are recognized to speak, please mind the following procedures. Please say your name, spell your last name, and give the name of your street. You do not need to give the house number. All public comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Rather than use any of your time answering questions, the Township Committee will wait until you finish speaking before responding. There are 2 public comment sessions on tonight's agenda. Each member of the public will be limited to 1 comment of up to 3 minutes during each public comment period. Written comments submitted to the Township Clerk before 3 p.m. today will be read during the public comment sessions. Written comments are subject to the same guidelines as oral comments. Duplicative written comments may be summarized rather than read in full, according to guidelines issued by the New Jersey Division of Local Government Services. And we did not receive any written comments today.
Thank you, Mr. Conti.
For tonight's meeting.
Do we have anyone online in the digital realm?
We do not have any hands raised.
Thank you. I now invite anyone in the room to come up if they would choose to do so. We do not. So I'd like to now conclude the hearing of citizens. Move on to the next matter at hand, which is resolutions. Mr. Shahadi.
Thank you. As this is a workshop meeting, we generally don't take action at these meetings, and so we'll try not to unless necessary, but we do have a resolution on for your consideration. That is for the purchase of DPW trucks. So as you know, and when necessary, we do take action at workshop meetings because we do have that flexibility. And this is on because the contract pricing for these DPW trucks is valid actually only through September 12th. After that, it goes to the new pricing for the 2025 vehicles, and so that we keep this one within our budget and also what we expected, and not have any further delays by waiting for 2025 inventory. Our DPW director asked that we authorize the purchase of this DPW vehicle, and unless there's any questions, would ask for your vote in support of this, so that way I can approve the requisition tonight and have that vehicle ordered as soon as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Conti. I ask the members of the committee if they have any questions or comments with regard to this particular resolution. If I may, Mr. Shahadi, I just would like to confirm the manner in which it would be impacting the budget and source of funds.
Sure. This would be coming out of our capital budget, the budget that was adopted a couple months ago. So at the bottom of the resolution should also be a certificate of available funds, which would indicate the account. So you'll see it's coming out of the capital account for 2024.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Shahadi. If I may, just like to provide a brief comment with regard to this and the purchase for a DPW. It's been my experience that Rich Young, who leads Department of Public Works, I found him to be illustrating sound leadership and maintaining a high level of prudence in terms of managing resources. And I found that he does an incredible job of doing much with fixed constraints. So I do believe that he has taken care of the equipment and supplies there, managing the assets and optimizing asset life. So if he is providing a significant level of support in terms of purchasing this particular asset, I find no reason to object.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. So
We would need if there's no further discussion on it, then Mayor, just need a motion and a second on this one.
terrific. I then seek a motion.
So moved?
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Mr. LeConte?
Mr. Lois?
Yes.
Mr. McHugh?
Yes.
Mrs. Rowland?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Choi?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. LeConte.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Shoddy. On to reports. Mr. Shoddy, I seek your counsel on how you'd like to tackle this.
Sure. I didn't receive any questions or comments on any of the materials submitted, so none of the professionals are here. That said, then we can just go in sequence on the agenda, so I'll start off with administration.
Terrific.
We do have an ordinance that will be proposed for consideration at the next meeting, and it comes at the request of the planning board. Deputy Mayor, you sit on the planning board too, so I think you're familiar with this one. You all received this. It was drafted by, I believe, the planner and in consultation with the board attorney, and our township attorney is reviewing it. So there are some minor tweaks that will be made, nothing significant, but this concerns the Ferber Farm overlay. Open it up for discussion or questions or any further clarification you would like.
Do you think it merit to just give a Reader's Digest summary of what prompted, what led up to this?
Sure. Yeah.
Yes.
Would you like, I mean, I can certainly do that, or,
Yeah, if you.
yeah. Tim, do you want to speak on it?
It was, here we go, yep, this is sorry, right here. So this was, drafted by the township planner, and I'm opening it now. So, the information we got was that the property was purchased by PSE&G as a laydown construction project area. They got approved for that, never actually used it that way. They ultimately chose to convey most of the property for inclusion in the National Wildlife Refuge. A portion of the property is to be conveyed to the Great Swamp Watershed Association, and they're proposing to relocate their headquarters there within the refuge. So that use is not permitted in the R1 zone, which is why they want the overlay zone to permit that. I have some housekeeping things and also some clarifications that I requested of the planner and attorney, and I'll review with Z just to make things clear. When we're including additional uses, I always like to just make sure that it's very abundantly clear what we're permitting. So I'm just gonna fine tune some of that, and then that's what permitted, but that's what necessitated it. That's how it came about.
Terrific. Thank you, Ms. Kafoni. I do have a comment, but should I share that at this point in time, or do we take additional? Okay. With regard to this particular ordinance, I'd like to make a special note here, because sometimes municipal government gets it right. And in this particular case, while it may be modest in size, I think is a classic example of really well-coordinated interdepartmental cooperation. So this involved the planning board and ultimately the committee, as well as other organizations, Great Swamp, the Watershed, and also the Environmental Commission. So I'd like to give commendations to Chairman Kevin Sullivan and Frank Banish, the planning board planner, as well as the other members of the planning board who took this on proactively, saw the forthcoming complications with regard to the current zoning, the R1 zoning, and the intended use by the watershed. So got ahead of it and was creative and thought through, batted around a number of ideas and came up with what I think is ultimately a simple but elegant solution to affording a pathway for the watershed. It required and certainly involved a number of other functions and municipal divisions. So, I think it's hats off to everyone there as in terms of making this seamless and providing a nice path for the watershed to do what they'd like to do in terms of promoting their programs and their educational services. So thank you all. This is a nice example.
I have a question about this. Was there a vote at the planning board, and what was that vote? Was it unanimous? What was the breakdown of that?
I will defer from speaking because I was traveling abroad for those meetings.
I'll ask.
Yes, there was a vote, and the vote was to recommend that the ordinance be introduced and adopted by the Township Committee. Hence that memo that was distributed to the committee from the planning board.
Mm-hmm.
And the vote was unanimous to recommend it to the committee.
Thank you for that. That's for public purposes. I appreciate that.
Good, Mr. Shoddy?
Unless there's any further discussion on it, it's good to go for the next meeting for introduction.
Members of the
No
committee, any objections? I
Well-
see, I'm sorry, Mr. Lowe.
I would like to review, of course, what Ms. Capone comes up with, because it sounds like there will be some adjustments.
And I can provide it to the committee in red line form so you can see whatever changes I proposed as well.
Sure.
Would it be
Yeah,
fair
and I
to-
do have one question, and that is, based upon this use, I understand that, but would that have impact on any future properties that we're aware of?
Did you say future properties?
Yeah, in other words, not just this property for this intended use, right? Does that carry over, or is this a one and done for this particular situation on the overlay?
It applies to specific properties, but it doesn't apply for this particular moment in time. So if for
Okay.
some reason that falls through, a year from now, it would still apply. But it only to
Okay.
those properties.
Okay, so this doesn't become an R1 acceptance?
No, it's overlay
Right.
only with regard to specific
Right.
lots. It's not in all of R1. Well, I
Perfect, thank
presume
you.
it's not all of R1, yeah.
No, I mean, I think that's part of the adjustment that you're making, because if you look at the title of the ordinance, it specifies
Yes.
certain block and lot, but then in the actual, the adjustment to where it's ordained, it doesn't necessarily clarify that. So I think it's more of just some semantics and legal tightening up of the ordinance rather than making any substantive changes
Exactly.
to it.
Exactly.
To your point, Commissioner McHugh, it seems like the intention was that would only apply to block 4821, lots 174, 17403, and 180, which are commonly known as the Ferber Farm parcels.
Thank you.
And it's worth noting that once this, assuming this ordinance is introduced by the Township Committee, it'll get referred back to the planning board in its introduced form for the master plan consistency review. So there'll be plenty of public meeting transparency on this matter.
Terrific. So then if I may, provide directive to you, Mr. Shoddy, to move forward as stated, provided that we have an opportunity to review Ms. Capone's, should I say minor adjustments or revisions? Do we expect substantive or?
Yeah,
I don't think they're gonna be substantive. They're not gonna change the intent, they just
not the
might
intent, but
change the
Mr.
wording.
McHugh's question was pretty substantial from a legal point of view.
Well, so the overlay, just so I understand that, let me clarify. The overlay only applies to where we designate the overlay. So it preserves the definitions, parameters in R1 zones. The overlay, this particular overlay supersedes that, and it's only in this particular location.
So that's one of my questions. So, for example, the overlay, in some circumstances, a developer, and it's a little unique in this circumstance, but a developer could say, I wanna develop in accordance with the overlay, or I wanna develop in accordance with the R1. Is that the intent here, that you could do either one? Or are we saying now for these particular lots, you are only able to develop or use the property in accordance with the overlay?
I have an opinion on that, and I would say that it would be best to have that discussion with the greater members of the planning board, along with Frank Benish.
Well, then
I think
may
it's-
it need
Then we're
to go
not-
back to the planning board.
Yeah.
to
It
answer
may.
those questions, but you're gonna ask.
I'm gonna talk to Frank, and I'll talk to Z first, but I was gonna talk to Frank and ask these, he may be able to tell me the answers, but that's an example of a question I have.
Okay, so that could potentially be, I think that's material enough that, so
Yeah.
that'll be, so the directive here is subject to getting clarification on that one item. Fair to say?
That and similar type,
Okay.
similar
So the body of
clarifications.
work.
Me not trying to change anyone's intent, me trying to understand and make sure it clearly, expresses the exact intent of what they want to do here.
Terrific.
If I may, Chair, just to offer that, I wouldn't need this to come back to us again for another workshop, but it sounds like, I think our intent is pretty clear. I think you need to just tighten it up, and even if we can't, move this resolution forward in our next official meeting, I don't know that this needs to come back as a workshop.
Well, I guess there was a question, coming to your point though, is what is your intent? Because I mean, with that specific question, right, because these ordinances can originate here and go there, or originate there
Sure.
and come back here. So
Sure.
they may have one feeling on that, they may pick the option of the developer can do this or that, and you as a board may say, no, we wanna restrict it to this. So it would help, I mean, if they come up with something, we're assuming you're all fine with whatever they came up with, and if that's the case, fine, but is there an intent in your minds as to how that applies? That's just one example. And I mean, that's where, the benefit of this workshop is, because we don't want to be
Okay.
doing it when she's drafted it, introduced it, because she could also go back to Frank and say, hey, we talked about it with the governing body, and this is what they would like. So
Yeah,
what are
so-
your thoughts on it?
Yes, let me just offer my thoughts on that, and then anyone else could weigh in. I would just say that I would like to preserve it as both R1 with the overlay, because the idea being, anything could happen to any organization, and it would go back to its original use would be a possibility, so that would remain as R1 for whatever reason. If we're not picking a winner or losers here, or we're not picking a certain outcome. We've had an expression of, I guess, and everyone's sort of amenable to it, and it seems like a good idea, but if that for some reason doesn't go through, I don't see why we'd have to come back to us to then revert back to just the singular R1. So I think that optionality doesn't hurt us.
Okay,
That is typically how overlays work, but,
right,
yeah.
right.
So it's additive, not, so it's additive.
Additive, but like either one. It's not like anyone in the R1 has to also satisfy this, because this just wouldn't work that way. So it's either one, you could choose either one, whichever one you wanna go by.
For
You can-
these lots.
In the overlay,
In the overlay.
that's correct, yes.
Yes, correct. Since we're down this road, can I go through a
Yeah, I
couple
think
more
it-
kind of
unless you don't
bigger?
want to, but it,
Do you want to or not?
Time management, we lose Mr. McHugh.
I mean, besides, if you look at the
25
agenda,
minutes.
besides these items under administration, which I think there's not much else after this, so.
Ms. Cafoni, you think we can tackle that in like 3-4 minutes?
What I'm about to talk?
Yes.
I think so.
Okay, let's
Okay.
go. Off
All
that
right.
way.
It talks about outdoor storage. That's a sticky item usually, and the question is it meant to permit outside storage? It says storage area for equipment. Is that outside storage, or are we talking just indoor storage? Is it only for equipment, supplies also? What about vehicles? Maybe I take back my statement about the foreman.
Yeah, the Ferber Farm has a large barn, let's say, where their equipment was previously stored, and where-
Inside.
I would essentially was used as a garage, but it's not attached to the farmhouse, but
That's fine.
it's its own structure. I believe that's what they're referring to, is that
Okay,
structure.
so that would be indoor storage.
It's indoor storage, yeah, it's
Okay,
added.
because that's, I think, an important distinction. A couple of them, I could talk to Frank Banish about. It's more just definitions, you know, we're adding uses like a water quality laboratory, but we don't have a definition for what that means. So it's things like that that I would certainly defer to Frank and his expertise on what that would, what that definition would be. Again, just with the use being defined. So I think that's all the ones that we need. The rest are really defined. Frank definitions of what he means, like by a garden, or so I think the other things would be appropriate to get Frank's thoughts on it and his expertise and given his familiarity with the property, and I will make sure and include a red line so you all see it exactly what's proposed, and we can. I think most of it will be clarification items.
Understood. Thank you, Ms. Caponi. On to the next.
Okay. For the next meeting, the Public Safety Committee and I reviewed the upcoming contract for purchase of a fire apparatus. Committeewoman Rowland, I don't want to speak on your behalf, but I believe you and the mayor both endorsed this moving ahead. We looked at the finances, got a copy of the contract, the schematics, the design, all that information was provided in the agenda packet, so unless there's any objections or you need further clarification on items or have questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'd like to move this ahead at the next meeting to authorize the contract. This is for the Chatham Township Fire Department apparatus.
Members of the committee, any questions, comments?
Okay.
Terrific, Mr. Shoddy. We move on.
Sounds good. Not much detail to provide on this one, which is the senior center lighting project, other than we've got it teed up. As you know, we've had some conversations about that in the past months. It's out to bid. The bids are due, I believe, on the 19th. So once they come in, our engineer will review those, legal will review those if there's no issues. And so not to delay this any further, we'd like to move forward with making an award of this project at the next meeting. Any questions on that, concerns with that plan of action? Okay. Affordable housing, public transportation services. We did receive those bids last week. Only one bid came in. The attorney is reviewing those bids, and we will have a recommendation for the governing body for the next meeting. We could discuss it at that time in executive because it is potential contract negotiation, but depending on her review, one of three courses of action: either we award, we reject, reject and reauthorize a bid to go back out. So we'll find that out soon. You'll get a copy of that memo, and we'll have to take that action at the next meeting.
Can I just ask one quick confirmation?
Yes.
And I think that's all it is a confirmation. And that is, there was the original fee, and then there was a per-use fee. That is edited, correct?
I'm sorry, the last question?
Yeah, there was a contract amount,
Yes,
and then there was a per-use amount. That is in addition, correct?
correct.
Thank you.
But users at certain address, the affordable housing are exempt, are they not, from that fee?
No.
No?
No, that was a per ride fee.
Okay. And lastly, we did talk about this briefly in executive session, and it's material, that's these municipal services agreements. We'll have those also finalized for review in executive session at the next meeting, but the intent is to adopt resolutions to authorize those agreements. They're going to be fairly standard agreements. This is under state law, the municipal services reimbursement that we provide to condos and apartment buildings that are receiving services along the same lines of what other residents are receiving. So whether that is, if it applies to them, hydrants, street lighting, snow plowing, and recycling. We don't provide garbage, so garbage wouldn't be included. So the three properties that we're working on agreements for are Melrose, Enclave, and the Cornerstone, which is the new 522 Southern Boulevard. So this isn't doing anything more than we have to do. It's doing exactly what we are obligated to do under the law, but we're memorializing them into written agreements, both for Cornerstone and for Enclave, because they're newer. They didn't have those, so these are new agreements. And then for Melrose, it was found that we didn't have an agreement to cover, I believe, their hydrants. So
Yeah, it wasn't specific at all in their
Right.
existing agreement, so we'll make it uniform and make it consistent with the others. Make it very clear what we're providing and not providing.
And under that, we either provide the service or we reimburse the service at our cost. So for example, if they're gonna plow their snow, we would reimburse them at what it would cost us to plow the snow. So we do calculations such as length of miles of road in the town, our costs for the year, the per mile charge, and that's how we assess that. Hydrants, they're set rate, and lighting is a set rate, so those are pretty standard.
Would the respective properties provide us proposals that they plan to engage in for these services? And therefore, our exercise is doing a cost analysis? Or
We don't
how do
care
make
what
this-
their expense is, frankly, because we reimburse them at our rate. The law allows us to reimburse them at our rate.
Okay.
So they could be paying $50,000. They may say, listen, we don't want you to plow, and that happens because they want to prioritize. They know that if the town's doing, doing the plowing, then we prioritize main arteries. We may not do things to their standard. So they know we want to plow. Okay, fine, but we're reimbursing you at what our cost would be, not what your cost would be.
Well, you said rate earlier and then cost, so is it, so I'll give you an example, snow plowing. If municipal-wide, we plow after 2 inches and they are plowing at 1 inch, are we paying at that rate or,
I see what you mean.
right? So is it a fixed dollar or a rate?
No, so we calculate it based off of a mile rate, but in other words, we look at total length, what is our rate, but then in the event of, snow, it's not necessarily, it would be consistent with our policy on when we plow.
Okay. So then effectively it's dollars. Yeah.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
dollars, but
Because they could be plowing at second 1 inch falls, but we're only gonna pay them after, 2 inches fall, for example. at that
Right,
going
and I
rate.
don't,
Okay.
we're not dealing with that at the Cornerstone because there's no road there.
Mhm.
We're not dealing with that at
Well-
Melrose. So, the only one we're
Enclave.
dealing with that is the Enclave.
Okay. Understood. Thank you, Mr. Shawty.
And that's it for ordinances and resolutions for the next meeting. Discussion and action, there was a request from an organization, from a group of individuals tied to the community, also a channel club, to put together an obstacle race for veteran suicide awareness. A lot of details in your packet on that. They are requesting, use of the Green Village Loop Park off of Green Village Road. They did specify no obstacles would be taking place there. It would just be it was like a hike / run in that park. They did indicate that they would provide us with the required insurance and we would sign an indemnity agreement with them. They have met with police. They did just today advisement they are looking to adjust the date on it. I think move it up by one, or move it forward by 1 day, or move it up by 1 day. I didn't get that directly from them. The chief relayed it to me. They're going to send me more info, but wanted to get that on your radar, see if there's any concerns. Seems like with a lot of other events in town, they're approved administratively, but being that this is a new event, wanted to make sure that there were no concerns or objections. I did run this by Open Space and Environmental Commission also because of the use of that park, and they both supported it. So we're prepared to support and make sure that this is a success, but want to see if you have any concerns or questions on that.
Did I read correctly that we would have to block part of the road because they're gonna have access from like the Chatham Club to cross the street there and then on the other side of Green Village as well?
So my understanding, and the chief just had a meeting with them today, so I think they're
Okay.
still working. What they put is what their intent or what they would like, and then our police department will, put safety measures in place. We're not looking to close down any roads, so if anything, it would just be for crossing, safe crossing as people are, getting from one side to the other. So we're not looking at, from my meeting with the chief this morning, they're not looking at any street closures. It would just be, like I said, temporary, crossing assistance. They'd be running on sidewalks or alongside. So once the chief finalizes those details, it would be done safely and in accordance with what the PD can manage, but,
Are we approving just having the event, or are there costs associated with it that we would be incurring that we should be thinking
no
about?
costs that they've raised, none that I've identified, and none that they're looking for us to cover. It would just be really for the use of that park space.
Got it. All right.
Any questions or concerns or comments from other members of the committee? Mr. Shoddy, I have just a couple of questions. Who is actually going to run the event? It's sponsored by the Chatham Club and Team Car Wash.
Yes.
Is there a third-party vendor who is setting up the obstacles and bringing in volunteers, or is it?
It's
their
it's
volunteers?
individuals from those organizations that are taking on a volunteer role. So one of them is Frank Ezra, I don't want to mispronounce his name, but Frank and some other folks from the Chatham Club as well that are putting this together.
So this would be the foray into running an event like this. They've never done something like this.
Correct.
Do they have?
Maybe they've done, not this exact one, they may have done events, I don't want to speak to what they've done in the past, unrelated to this, but similar. But they did indicate that there's folks on the team that have some experience in, races and athletic events.
Do they have any an educated guess on the scale list, participants, volunteers?
I think they did put some estimates in the paperwork. Let me just see if I can pull that up. 'Cause I do remember them putting some numbers in there. I just don't know it off the top of my head. Says here, so in the past they held a charity Fit to Food 5K run walk. This one they're looking at 150 participant max capacity for this event.
Okay. At this juncture, you're seeking from the committee on a go, no go, go subject to, learn more about it, continue the dialogue.
And okay to go ahead and handle this administratively. Like I said, all the other things, like 5K, there's a turkey trot, there's other events that happen in town that don't come before the governing body. And just want to make sure that this is not coming as a surprise to any of you, and that there's no, issues that you want to flag for me. Otherwise, I would tell them that it's okay. So it doesn't necessarily require a vote. However, a consensus that you're all okay with this proceeding is more than, is just really what I'm asking for.
And you're saying they were gonna move it from November 10th to around the 8th or the 9th or something
Correct,
like that?
like the
that's
chief
fine.
told me they may
It's
have to change the
Saturday,
date, so
right.
I don't know exactly what date it is. He'll get
That's
back to
somewhere
me
around
on that. But I don't wanna, they've gotta go ahead and start with the marketing and the planning, so I don't wanna wait until October, and start. So I wanted to have this conversation sooner rather than later.
Certainly the cause is good, and certainly the having some background in doing this kind of thing, that's great. And I can be supportive as long as they don't make me do it.
I've done a couple of these things, like Tough Mudder and
Yeah.
Spartan. Oh, yeah. So, based on firsthand experience, I see no reason not to further explore, pursue this, provided we make sure, it sounds like they've already engaged police, emergency squad. I'm sure they're gonna need some kind of medical services on standby. At least have the conversation with them. I don't know how they're gonna handle that. And post-event cleanup. I don't know if you can bond for that, or I don't know. But some surety that they're not gonna leave the township lands a complete mess, particularly if it rains before the event.
Okay. Any other
Yeah.
concerns?
No
Otherwise,
cons-
I can tell them they can go ahead with this.
Yeah, Chatham Club has been a wonderful amenity to the township, and they practically have their own obstacle course right next to the building. They have a little outdoor runway that they set things up all the time. I'm sure they'll do a great job.
That's an okay.
That's an okay.
Thank you. And the last item I've got is your approval for an indemnity agreement with the Chatham Township Fire Department to use the municipal facility primarily for the alcohol sale. It's their annual event that they do every year, but they are selling alcohol on municipal property. So just want to get an okay from all of you about this.
Sure.
I'm okay.
I can support.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's it under admin, and unless there's anything for the clerk or any of these other department reports, under public works is a standard resolution for Gov Deals auction. We're auctioning off 2 vehicles over there. I did look into repurposing them if possible, but they've got serious suspension and transmission issues. So I'm advised by our professionals that we're better off offloading them.
I do have a question for under administration.
Yes.
We are doing final adoption of the parks and, or we should be, I think, doing final adoption of parks and rules and regulations in the upcoming meeting. And in the previous meeting, and we workshopped that for a little bit. I had brought up the closure of Esternay, or the locking off to car traffic of Esternay. I just find that was also, that's still the case today. So could you tell me what the progress is on addressing that issue with the barricade being up and locked on Esternay?
I think that's part of a larger conversation that deals with security. I can certainly have the chief either come to the next workshop meeting, we can discuss that collaboratively, or we can workshop that with the rec committee.
Okay, just that the mayor had asked you directly to address that in our last meeting when I brought this up. So.
My recollection of how that was, directed for a conclusion was probably not the same as yours then.
Well, I'm not asking for a conclusion, I'm asking for an update.
There's no update. It's the answer that's been provided every single time this keeps coming up is that it is a safety issue, and that's why that gate's been there and continues to be there unless the governing body wants to change that policy.
Okay, well, that's actually an update, because it's never been stated publicly that the gate is locked during the day, during daylight hours, as a matter of security and safety.
It has been stated, I know, because I've said that before.
Okay, well, to me, that's an update. I haven't heard that before. So in order to move this forward, to have the public park be publicly accessible by, to all residents where they live within, a few feet of Esternay, or they can walk up that, very steep area of, our steep slopes to get to Esternay. Most people would drive in that would use it, especially people with young kids, and I'm wondering what we would have to do to move forward with, securing that area or making it public park publicly accessible.
I mean, it is publicly accessible, it's just that the path is not accessible to vehicles.
This is
People
the gate
can
that's up
park
at the
outside
front,
the
correct?
gate. Yeah, people can park, plenty of people, I see it during the day, they park outside the gate and they can walk and they can do whatever, but that is not a road, it is, even during games, there's issues with vehicles going up and down there, either safely or unsafely, while others are there. Also, the more traffic that's put on that road, further erosion is that road does erode quite a bit, and so there's more issues to it that to represent it as a not publicly accessible park is inaccurate. It is publicly accessible, it's open to the public, but people are limited in how far they can take their vehicles into the park.
Yeah, it's
Because
probably
you don't want people.
4 car lengths of cars could potentially park there. I mean, it's not an open and welcoming place. There's a lock there and a barricade that's up. And I've asked to address this. This is actually the furthest that we've gotten into a conversation about this, which is great. I would be I'm looking for next steps for, you know, if there are safety issues, I'd like to know maybe what they are, but more importantly, you know, what mitigating measures are available to us, what those might cost, what we could do to get this park more publicly accessible.
So, Mr. Lewis, you're putting forth the question of, can we open this up during what would be deemed typical hours for
Yeah,
a
in a
public park?
common
Okay.
way that common people could understand that, hey, you know, this thing's, it's a park, it's flat, but it's on a steep slope, so to get there practically, especially if you have a kid
Yeah,
and you're gonna use one of the
understood.
kiddie playgrounds, you're gonna drive there, you know, how do we get there, you know? Or like, mom with the stroller is gonna kinda off-road it around this barricade, I mean, it's a little bit silly.
Could I suggest this, Mr.
Yes.
Lois? Since this is a park and a rec matter, and it is something that is getting my curiosity, if I may suggest we work together to explore that and figure out
Love it.
if there's a pathway to get this open. There may not be, I'm not sure. I don't know the history to it, but it
Yeah,
does strike me.
there might not be, but I'd
as
love
something
to,
interesting.
see what solutions there could be put in place.
So we'll handle it that way.
Sounds good. That's it, Mayor.
Great.
We did have a residual item for executive, which we could cover, or we could
We'll try.
deal with that in another meeting. Committeeman McHugh, I want to be mindful of your time as well.
Keep going.
Okay.
Great.
Yes, go.
Okay.
I'll
Sprint.
pull a Hertz of the old commercial and
French
sprint.
press gate.
So, Mayor, I don't know if you want to do another public session, and then we go into executive.
Well,
That's it
yeah.
for.
Yeah.
Final hearing.
We'll do the hearing of citizens.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Shoddy. I now would like to open up the second hearing of citizens, if I may.
Same rules as last time. We do not have any hands raised on Zoom at this time. But, you know, anyone in the audience is welcome to come up if they so choose.
So I now invite anyone in the room, if they're so desirous, to speak. Kindly ask you to do so now. No one has come forth.
And still no hands raised on Zoom.
Terrific, Mr. Loconti. I now will close the second hearing of citizens. Mr. McHugh, how are you on time?
Greg, do I have to go back into the other Zoom, or am I on this one?
If we go back.
Is this
to
an
executive
exigent
meeting-
matter? Like, must we?
One item of it is,
Okay,
I mean,
fine.
the chief's been on ice for half of this, the other half of it is not, so.
Yeah, because, so Mr.
The
McHugh
committee
needs
was
to,
in the last meeting on it, so I don't know if, you know. It was regarding,
he would need to log off and get,
going to the other
Yeah.
one, yeah.
And I'll have to see if I can get us access to that again, since that's, you know, that meeting was expired.
But you could just turn off the public on this one, actually, and just stay here. Make sure
This
that
is a
public-
webinar,
Yeah, we could just end the street and the public access, I'll show you in a second.
okay.
But, did we vote to go into exec?
No, we
no,
will still have a motion in a second.
I seek a motion to move into second executive session.
So moved?
Do I have a second?
Second?
Second.
Thank you. We are now.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. McHugh?
Yes.
Mrs. Rowland?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Troy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Loconti. We are now in executive session.
But
We just
before-
need
Well, hold on.
a technical
Let's make
thought.
sure we are technically in executive session.
I think Z's gonna have to, that's beyond my
Recording stopped.
tech knowledge.
Okay, we've got digital.